Mahmoud, you can hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mahmoud. Salam and a warm welcome to our most honorable chief guest, chair, wonderful keynote, fellow panelists in this webinar, as well as to the online audience gathered here today. I hope all are doing great. Not much to really add after what we have already heard, but I will try to briefly focus and talk about the role of connectivity and the 5G ecosystem for the success of 4IR. How technology is growing and in scale to be renamed as 4IR candidates, and how policies and standards are shaping up in our country. Now, thanks to this webinar, we definitely have by now a strong measure of what 4IR is and how it could change our future. But like many of us, I also do believe that 4IR is the fusion of logical, biological, physical, and digital worlds. Not necessarily in the same order, but essentially with the same components. And exactly here, it differs from the previous industrial revolutions. Now, 4IR is not really about technology, as we already heard in the call. It's more about, killing the asymmetry between demand and supply value chain, and in the process, bettering our lives. But again, at its core, there is technology, and more importantly, how we use it. In the space of just last 6 years, globally, there were around $700 billion invested in cloud and quantum computing, automation, IoT, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, and mixed reality. And it was done primarily to beef up the 4IR journey. And if we look forward, this investment is expected to create almost $4 trillion value in the global manufacturing industry, and it is quite on track for it. Now, with this massive investment, how does it really tally in terms of 4IR potential? Today, only 29%, around 29% of the global industries can say they have, some sort of 4IR projects deployed. The 41% in the small and medium scale pilots and mostly pep talks. And the remaining 30% have not done anything so far. So we can imagine that how much more investment is in the pipeline and how bigger the 4IR market is going to be in the next few years when this rest 71% starts rolling the dice. So with such scale of investment and commitment in 4IR field across all these diversified technologies, how does connectivity complement the rise of 4IR? Now, I'll start with a very small example. Let's take cloud computing. Cloud has been there for a while, but the current scale of use has made it a 4IR candidate. We know that the cloud is not really a storage anymore. This was initially a storage concept, but this is not a storage anymore. Today, it's rather a great source of artificial intelligence and machine learning based analytics that is offered as AaaS, or Analytics as a Service. At the same time, the rise of cloud-based video conferencing, like today's call, the multi-party gaming, as well as video content sharing and streaming has created multi-billion-dollar market all over the places. Now, of course, there is cloud, right? But how to maintain connectivity to this massive cloud? In order to maintain that connectivity, we need to have the assurance of high bandwidth, low latency, zero disruption internet. And this is where 4IR and 5G make a tag team. Now, not only cloud computing, almost all the 4IR use cases rely on seamless, low latency, high bandwidth internet or intranet. Let's take another example of AI-enabled robotics and industrial automation that we already heard in this call also. Now, in terms of productivity, we do hear that it can reduce manual intervention by 50% or more, which probably makes it perhaps the most important 4IR choice of technology. Now, what is the role of connectivity here? Let me be very specific. We would need a minimum data speed or peak data rate of 2 to 3.5 gigabit per second for a medium scale manufacturing use case. A one that probably uses a moderately complex machine learning algorithm. And it would also need a latency of 2 to 3 milliseconds and at an affordable price to serve. Now, that is almost 100 times the bandwidth that we have today or use today in most of our houses today in Bangladesh. So we can see that how much work to be done in the connectivity layer as we take a step forward to the 4IR journey. A little ahead of time, But the future of R&D industry could look quite different. And we know, we talk about it. Today it's based on low wage market, labor market. But down the line, 3 to 5 years, will it remain the same? Will not 3D printing come and make an impact? It could take a shot. American and ASEAN countries could take the first movers advantage by deploying 3D printers, giving 0 defects and 24 hours production efficiency. Now, we might think that 3D printing is expensive and probably not think too much about it today, but that's just today, and it might well be commoditized in near future, the way that we see the booming sensor market all over the places, especially on the Asian market. Now, 5G will again be a critical factor in handling the latency and massive machine-to-machine communication for the success of 3D printing. We talked about 0 latency or low latency. We will be talking about ultra reliable low latency when we will be having 5G in the market. Now that we see a very clear correlation between 4IR and 5G, let's just zoom out and see that how 5G really works, a slightly broader view. Now, interesting about 5G is, it's different. It's based on open architecture. It's different from the previous 2, 3, or 4Gs. When it comes to 5G operationalization, the role cannot be played by one party. It has to be the telecom operators, the fiber companies, the relevant regulatory bodies, and the policymakers. They have to come together. Now, countries who have already done 5G, they have deployed and set up the whole 5G portfolio that includes the new business models around 4IR, new value chains, new privacy rules, a more comprehensive device strategy, cyber resilience. We also see technology convergence because there is already 2G, 3G, 4G. So you have to have a technology convergence and interoperability for 5G to work properly. And they're doing it, keeping the 4IR at the core of their focus. And we also do hope that by next year, we will see the birth of 5G in Bangladesh as well. Now, coming back to the policies, it's still early days as we discussed, but we do see some tractions from an industry standpoint. There are some tractions from few corners. I don't know if you're aware of it, but there is a website called skills.gov.bd, implemented by A2I, ICT, division together with UNDP. And it's pretty good. When I went there, I tried to browse it, and I found that the team there, they work to identify the future skills required for 4IR. They map it to the business areas that we need for our country. They also evaluate the gaps and improvement areas, and they lay out a relevant directives on how to proceed. I really found it pretty good beginning, I would say. Again, I went to the ICT portal and did a due diligence, and I found that the ICT Policy Gadget of 2018, specifically sections 1, 2, and 3, indicate that how the government is planning to leverage artificial intelligence, automation, interoperability of intelligence systems on a large scale. The paper also indicates that what are the granular activities required in each section and which department would be focusing on what aspects. But some of the things that what I figure out that there could be some things that where we need a little more focus. Number one, I think the anchoring and driving of 4IR policies need a central entity. We also heard from our fellow panelists about that. I do believe that's probably the way to go. To shed lights on the entry barriers for industries, yet to embrace 4IR. That's important. What are the entry barriers they would probably feel, see how to really help them overcome those. We have to prioritize the specific 4IR investment areas. We can't jump, with all guns blazing in every direction of 4IR. That probably would not work. So we need to see that what are the best return on investment areas for Bangladesh, and we need to prioritize those specific 4IR use cases, even in the policies. We have to have an upskilling plan. It doesn't happen overnight. We need to have a plan that probably is not only activity oriented, but also outcome oriented. That's important to keep in mind. There has to be an outcome oriented policy to understand that how the upskilling journey needs to take place. Also, we felt that it has to be an inclusive 4IR investment plan, to ensure it's an ecosystem game. We know that we must ensure that it is inclusive enough to make sure nobody is left out from this ecosystem. And also, what we felt that if somebody is taking a first mover's advantage, somebody is taking some risk, we have to incentivize them, and that should be part of the policy as well. Now, to summarize, we need to put our strategy and execution excellence in the same line of sight for our preferred 4IR sectors, but with more compelling call to action. I think call to action is something that probably needs to be more underlined and put under focus if we are to really work as a nation to go about 4IR. And by doing so, if ever be there a digital divide in the world, courtesy to this 4IR, I see we have all the potential to end up on the better side of this divide. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Asif.